There we go. Welcome and good morning, everybody. And thank you for joining us on our last Sunday service of the month for Stewardship Month. We're glad you're all here, and we have quite a feast laid out that we hope you'll stay for after. You'll notice on the back of the order of service, we're starting to put our announcements of upcoming events. So it's something you can take home and get on your calendar, put up on your refrigerator or whatever you'd like to do, just to remind yourself. So I will note that in addition to the barbecue this afternoon, right after service, Tuesday is our Super Supper with Congregation Kol Shalom. That will be at the Eagle Harbor Church on Bainbridge in Winslow. And then on the 1st of April, 1st, 8th, and 22nd, is a poetry writing workshop. Do we need RSVPs or just?
It would be helpful if people RSVP, but...
Let Reverend Zachary know if you intend on going to that. I'm guessing no talent is needed. All the talent? Oh, I can't go. I'd be right out. So I want to welcome you today on our worship service about origin stories. And so I will just remind you all, if you're unaware, that today is Make Up Your Own Holiday Day. So you can create your own origin story today by creating a holiday. Thank you and welcome.
Our opening words are the poem Census by Carol Muskie Dukes. Here's how we were counted. Firstborn, naysayers, veterans, slow payers, seditionists, convicts, half-breeds, has-beens, the nearly defined dead, all the disenfranchised live. Once everyone had a place among the nameless. Now we can't afford to be anonymous. Consider, they said, the poor, the misfit. Consider the woman figuring her self-percent. Consider the PA system making a point so intimate, I petition not to be anybody's good guess or estimate. I ask to be one. Maybe widow to be watching the sun diminish brick by brick along the jail wall, and also that green pear on its drunken rollout of the executioner's lunch basket. At 12:01:02, the cock chamber of the digital clock, the newsman said, "There'll be less work in the new century. And my job will be, as usual, forgetting or getting it backwards. Each non-integer, tender and separate, fake rosebud, Rolodex, cab full of people, obedient to traffic, moss on a baby's headstone. Minus and minus shock each minute, the kiss, its loss, each newborn and condemned to be, in one breath, executed and blessed. Each week we come together, bringing with us oftentimes conflicting feelings, the joys, the sorrows, the love, the pain in our life. And yet we come together so that together we might see and hold each other. We can no longer be anonymous. We come together to be known. Come, let us worship together.
Thank you, Meredith. Today, behind the scenes of our typical church in-a-box setup, many of our usual suspects out there are back there busily preparing a congregational barbecue and gathering. Church potlucks are the stuff of legend. Communing over a plate of fried chicken and macaroni and cheese is a weekly activity in Southern churches, large and small. Sharing coffee hour after church over a meal serves a dual purpose. It keeps people around after church because they know they'll be rewarded with a delicious plate of food, and it provides time and space to gather, talk, and find out what's going on in the lives of people who you worship with, but maybe don't talk to as much as you'd like. This long-standing church potluck tradition is one of the many ways the wizards behind the curtain of church well-being keep the home fires burning, keep the home fires of the church burning. I kept coming back to the importance of keeping the home fires burning this week as I reflected on the topic of origin stories. One of the most potent and personal origin stories I created for our family draws inspiration from Hestia, the Olympian goddess of the hearth. When our family was complete with 3 very young children and 2 young parents, one parent worked outside the home and the other parent stayed home to care for the 3 children. In the daily routines typical of a young family with 3 children at home, they hadn't entered their school years yet, I, the stay-at-home parent, worked hard to create gentle routines that took into account their interests and needs as individual small humans while creating a fun and loving home base. This wasn't always easy or pretty, But I've been told by other mothers who were friends at the time and on the same journey with their own kids that I always spoke in a calm voice and repeated simple tasks and directions without ever appearing outwardly impatient. They were lying. I know. I know that on the inside, I got very impatient at times, but I've been told that I conveyed endless patience while dealing with my children as we all operated in toddler time. During this time with my young children, I discovered Jean Shinoda Bolen's book, Goddesses in Every Woman, an amazing account of all the Greek goddesses and their archetypal roles as women. I quickly figured out that a well-rounded contemporary woman consists of attributes from multiple goddesses. Hera, Zeus's wife, represents the relationship between the spouses. Hera's dedication to Zeus is apparent, but also is her jealousy of Zeus and his earthly pursuits with mortals down on earth. Greek gods and goddesses, after all, are famously polyamorous. Demeter represents the nurturing mother, in addition to her connection to the harvest through her relationship with her daughter Persephone. Demeter's attributes align with being a patient, nurturing parent. Aphrodite represents romantic love. The goddess Athena represents wisdom and is also the goddess of weaving and crafts, which naturally intersect with the home arts. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, but is also the goddess of childbirth, so named because she assisted her mother in birthing her twin brother Apollo. Don't ask how that worked. I found the most inspiration in the simple story of Hestia. Hestia was the firstborn child of Cronus and Rhea, the two titans who partnered and created the gods and goddesses of Mount Olympus. You all know these. I know everybody knows these stories by heart. As the keeper of the metaphorical and literal hearth of our home, I drew strength from the idea that Hestia had one main focus: keep the Mount Olympus fire burning so gifts and sacrifices to the gods and goddesses would find their way to the divine altar where the deities held court. Hestia did not have many stories to her legacy. She was not one of the more prominent goddesses and has often been overlooked when recounting the more dramatic and interesting stories of the Greek pantheon. The singularity of Hestia's one overarching purpose of keeping the literal and metaphorical home fires burning kept me focused as I got caught up in the thousands of little details moving 3 youngsters through our daily routine. I would tell people that I am the firekeeper of our family, and when my children create their own homes as adults, I would bring some fire from our home to theirs so they could curate their own hearth and home rituals. We haven't done this yet. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we'll see what happens when our eldest buys a house with her husband in the very near future. I didn't realize it then, but this was the only chunk of time in our family life when outside influences were foreign to my small children, and Jeff and I had full control over the family culture that we were building in this early phase. Some of my friends, especially my UU friends, understood right away what I was actively creating and how I was using influence from the goddess archetypes to pull that together. Jeff understood, and that meant we were mostly all on the same page during this short and sweet time in our lives. One friend who really understood my deep appreciation for the goddesses and their archetypal role modeling in my life gave me this amazing book, Serving Fire. This book lines out simple home routines and rituals that can be implemented, inspired by Hestia, the goddess of fire, and her hearth-tending legacy. The gesture of the gift from my friend and the book itself were an affirmation of my ideas and intentions as a young mother creating a safe and loving home environment in a typically chaotic time in a family's life. There's something really reassuring about reading in print the principles you're embracing on a day-to-day basis when you don't have a whole lot of affirmation from other areas. especially when you choose to trust your instincts over mainstream advice shared in books and parenting magazines. Says the author, Anne Scott, in ancient times, the sacred flame was passed from one household to another, from mother to daughter. Today we pass the fire to our own children, even though we ourselves may only now be awakening to the importance of the sacred fire in our lives. The daily rhythms of life and simply the way we are can be the glowing coals we pass to our children, the spark that brings light to those parts of ourselves that long to know the sacred. I dedicate the lighting of the chalice to the stories we create and tell to remind ourselves of our beginnings and to make sense of our world. Please join me in the affirmation, in reciting the affirmation, which is printed in your order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are our brothers and sisters. To take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. Now please rise in body or spirit as you are able, don your mask, and join us in hymn number 18, which Alan will lead us in. What wondrous love is this?
I have a story for all of you. But first, Tyler, I need your help. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I put him on the spot a few weeks ago. So a long time ago, there was a little village that was on the edge of a field, a great vast pasture land, actually, and a forest. This village, the people were known for two things. They chopped firewood and raised sheep. I see, so I was supposed to include you. I see you nodding over here. They chopped firewood and raised sheep, just like Tyler and Jenny. So if you grew up in this village, there weren't a lot of options of what it was you were going to do when you grew up. You either chopped wood or raised sheep. Well, there was one little boy who lived or grew up with a family who just so happened to raise sheep. They were shepherds. They had been for generations now, and they had a vast, vast flock of sheep. Well, for this little boy, that meant that it was his job to learn to tend to these sheep. I don't know if you've ever spent much time out in a field with sheep. I have one time. I was in Romania, and the sheepdogs are quite vicious, and so I wasn't around the sheep long because they chased me off. But from what I understand about being a shepherd is it is not always the most exciting job. This little boy tried to find ways to keep himself entertained. He would lay on his back and watch the clouds and occasionally get up and make sure the sheep went somewhere new to graze and get water. He'd make sure that no predators came too close or the sheep didn't wander off into the woods or get separated. You got to keep the flock together. And still, the boy found himself growing increasingly bored and ran out of things to do. And so one day he decided, I'm going to create a little excitement. Some of you might know this story. Can you guess what he did? Any guesses? The boy said, it would be really funny if I cried wolf and all the people from the village and all the woodcutters in the woods came out and I could have a good laugh. He chuckled to himself and yelled, "Wolf! Wolf!" and waited. Soon the woodsmen came out of the woods with their axes and people from their homes carrying whatever they had. They had to protect the sheep. And they got there. And the boy laughed. And he said, I tricked you. I tricked you. There was no wolf, but boy, was that exciting. His parents came out and said, you can't do that. You can't do that. You got everyone all excited and riled up, and there was no wolf. Something will happen if you keep doing this. But the boy, like I can be, was stubborn. And he continued to tend to the sheep, and he would take them to places to graze, but he still found himself constantly bored. You can only watch so many clouds. And the sheep aren't much good to talk with. So after some time had gone by, the boy decided, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to cry wolf and get a little excitement in my life. And so he did it. Wolf! Wolf! And sure enough, here came everyone running again from their homes, from the woods, and they arrived to find the boy laughing. He thought it was so funny. I tricked you, he said. This time, everyone was upset with the boy. And he got a talking to, let me tell you. And they said, you will never do this again. We cannot believe you. We will not respond to you. He said, sure. So he went about, and again, some time passed. And finally, one day, the boy, while he was tending the sheep just near the edge of the forest, a wolf came out. And he cried wolf. But nobody came. That's all the story that I have for you today. At this time, I'd like to invite any of our youth who are here to process out to their activities that we have planned today. And as they go out, I'd invite you all, if you would just take a moment and maybe let's rub our hands together and give them some positive energy, some good vibrations, and just send them out with our love, with our care. Excellent. Thank you. The words for today's centering moment are words, a prayer that Pope Francis offered at an interfaith conference in 2017. The aim of the conference was to bring religious leaders around the globe together for the purpose of developing strategies to combat fake news. I've adapted the prayer a little bit so it will fit, I think, in our space a little better. But I'd like to offer these words, but first invite you to take a breath with me. Centering yourself in this moment, in the presence of yourself, the presence of one another, knowing that you are held here in community. Spirit of life and love, Spirit of laughter, make us an instrument of your peace. Help us to recognize the evil that can be latent in communication that does not build community. Help us to recognize the evil that can be latent in communication that is not true. We are a people of faith who put our trust in each other. May our words be seeds of goodness for the world. May the words that we share grow to truth. Where there is shouting, let us practice listening. Where there is confusion, let us work to inspire harmony. Where there is ambiguity, let us work and bring clarity. Where there is exclusion, let us be the ones to offer solidarity. Where there is sensationalism, let us bring rationality. Where there is superficiality, let us raise real questions. Where there is prejudice, let us awaken trust. Where there is hostility, let us bring respect. Where there is falsehood, let us bring truth. Amen.
Share your sorrows with us so you don't have to carry your burden by yourself. Share your joys with us so we can celebrate with you. If you feel so called, please come forward with your joy or sorrow. Tell us your name, share your sorrow or joy, and then place a stone in the water for your sorrow, or pour a little water in the bowl to represent your joy. And the joys and sorrows will not be live streamed or recorded. body or spirit and join us in hymn number 346. Is that right? 346, Come Sing a Song with Me. Unitarian Universalism is a grand vision of a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. That vision is embodied in a few large congregations, numerous mid-sized congregations, and many, many small congregations. No matter its size, every congregation depends on each of its members, each one of you, by your commitment of time, energy, and resources. Helps make that grand vision real. Individually and together, we are Unitarian Universalists, building a world filled with peace, justice, love, and joy. Will the ushers please come forward for the gathering? Thank you for your generous gifts.
Have you ever seen a stork's nest? So raise your hand. Have you ever seen one in real life? It's okay. They're quite impressive. A mass of sticks, branches, and grass all somehow woven together into a massive basket that exerts its weight on trees and rooftops and even, as I've learned, power poles. At times, their mass is so much that additional support will be added by people to prop the massive things up. If you haven't seen one of these in person yourself, there's a picture on the front of today's order of service. You can see there's 4 storks in there. The first time that I saw a stork's nest in person was in 2017. It was while I was in a car riding with my friend Laszlo through the Home Road Valley in Transylvania. This valley is a special place for Unitarians. It's the valley where many of our earliest Unitarian forebearers lived, and many of the villages in the Home Road Valley today are entirely Unitarian. This valley also is special because it resembles a little bit like, in my mind, I imagine that the Fertile Crescent or possibly the Garden of Eden would have looked like. Green hills that hold the basin. They form vistas where you can see small villages of 200 or 300 people scattered across the valley into the distance. Stands of oaks and fields of crops like sunflowers and wheat fill the space between these villages. As we came out of the wooded hills above the valley and made our way down to the floor, the road began to wind along a reed-crowded lakeshore. The water could hardly be seen between the stalks of cattails and grasses. As we drove, Laszlo explained to me that the people who lived in the upcoming village we were about to come through were known for fishing. For hundreds of years, they had lived on this lake, and that there among the reeds was a vast network of boardwalks and fishing shacks. The grass and reeds hid it all from view. I wouldn't have noticed unless Laszlo pointed out the occasional place where a roof could be just barely sticking above the cattails. The thing that I noticed, however, was these giant masses atop the power poles. They were mostly these sort of power poles that are common in this part of Europe from the communist era, made out of poured concrete that has been cast. So you have these concrete power posts with the power lines drooping between them. And on top of each of these posts, there was a massive basket. What made those? I asked Laszlo. What? He asked. Those, I said, pointing to the hulking masses atop the pole as we drove past. Oh, those? Those are stork nests, Laszlo said. Haven't you seen one before? So that's where babies come from, I retorted. After this exchange, I had to explain to Laszlo about the stories some people tell their kids about babies coming from storks and all the cartoonish depictions of bundled babies being carried in the grasp of stork bills, waiting to be delivered to doorsteps or down chimneys to expectant couples. Despite the robust folklore tradition in this part of the world, Laszlo admitted he had never heard this story. I tried explaining, it's just one of those stories you tell kids, or, something that they later find out isn't true. He wasn't quite grasping this genre of story. It's kind of like this, I said. So, in my family, we had a running joke among my sisters and I. We always played it on our younger siblings. Once it was played on you, it was your job to play it on someone else as the time approached. As someone approached the age of 5 years old, we would tell them that when you turn 5, you're going to grow a tail. We all grew them when we were 5. It's just part of what it means being in our family. Sadie had one, and I had one when I was 5, and Angie had one too just a few years ago. Now it was Aaron's turn. The thing is, though, the tail didn't last. Conveniently, it fell off as soon as you turned 6. Which is why the older kids could never show their tail to the younger as proof. This led to a lot of really hilarious situations. I would have been probably about 9 or 10 at this point in time. And I remember my sister Erin, who had turned 5 years old, would introduce herself to people saying, "My name is Erin Ray, and I'm 5 years old and still haven't gotten my tail." It's kind of like that, I told Laszlo. Babies come from storks, and kids grow tails when they turn 5. "I'll take your word for it," Laszlo laughed. To which I said, "That's okay. Birds aren't real." One thing I've learned over the course of my adult life is that there are things that we are told when we are younger that you later learn not to be true. I won't enumerate all of those because I don't know who has encountered that with all of the stories that came to mind. Sometimes these stories are told because the thing trying to be explained might be too difficult for people to explain to young children. And sometimes it's done as a type of joke, a gag or game. The other thing that I have learned is that sometimes when disillusionment washes over these stories and the veil is lifted and reality is revealed, we can feel demoralized. When my sister Erin finally learned we were playing a joke on her, she was crushed. It took time to regain her trust. I remember there was a brief period after this in which anything I told my sister Erin was greeted with the response of, "You're a liar." I think of the story of the boy who cried wolf and the consequences that come from the things that we tell others, the things that we lift up as if they are true, even if they are not. Sometimes it might be, in the case we can infer from the story, that you lose your life. Sometimes it's a loss of trust. And other times it's something else. Turning back to the storks. Birds aren't real. You see, that same year that I saw my first stork nest was the year I first heard someone claim that birds aren't real. According to the New York Times, this conspiracy phrase entered the zeitgeist in January of 2017. Donald Trump had just been sworn in as president, and protests broke out in cities across the United States. In Memphis, organizers called for a women's-led march to snake through the city and voice their opposition. One demonstrator, a 23-year-old college student named Peter McIndote, decided to join in this protest and traveled with some of his college friends to add their voices to the demonstration. As the march proceeded, pro-Trump counter-protesters also appeared. When McIndote saw them, he ripped a poster off a wall, flipped it over, and wrote 3 random words: Birds aren't real. When asked about the meaning of his message, Mr. Mickendote said it was part of a movement that believed that birds had been replaced with surveillance drones, and that the cover-up began in the 1970s. Unbeknownst to him, he was filmed and video posted on Facebook went viral, especially among teenagers. If this is your first time learning about the theory of birds, this theory of birds not being real, consider yourself lucky. It didn't take long for millennials like myself and Gen Zers to start spreading the word. Soon, memes were making their way around the internet. Pictures of drones labeled as birds appeared on social media sites. Podcasts started discussing the various ways in which government agents would capture these drones to replace the batteries in the surveillance devices. Even in my friend group, conversations were often punctuated with the line, "Birds aren't real." The story grew. People turned back to the 2016 election. Maybe you remember that speech that Bernie Sanders was giving in Portland when the little bird came and landed right on the podium in front of him as he was talking. Further proof that birds aren't real. In some ways, it kind of did remind me of an earlier sort of conspiracy theory that I had picked up on. It was a way to squash other conspiracy theories. Someone would start talking about how NASA faked the moon landing, to which I would say, "You believe in the moon?" It's ridiculous and absurd, but without fail, in my experience, when someone says the moon landing was fake and you retort, "You still believe in the moon?" the conversation quickly reaches its end. Truth is a hard thing to pin down. We live in a time where fake news and conspiracy theories permeate our social discourse. Some of them are fun and even harmless. Others, on the other hand, can be more harmful. I'm thinking about the stories people spread about mind control devices and COVID vaccines, or stories about drag queens trying to indoctrinate our children, or others who keep insisting, despite all the evidence, that the election was stolen. I've heard it said by people that Unitarian Universalism is the faith in which you can believe whatever you want. And while we do have a very open and permeable theological membrane, it's a membrane, or it's a theology that encourages us to seek out and question. There are limits. We are a faith with centuries of questioning and spiritual exploration behind us. We have changed our minds again and again and again and cast off old beliefs and reinvented ourselves with each new generation. But this has not just been a willy-nilly search, taking us wherever the wind blows. We have not come to the conclusions we have by accident. This has been a systematic formation that has been unfolding, connecting us to each other, connecting us to those who will still come after us. Today, many UUs articulate this systematic formation by saying, we are called to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We are called to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Yes, we're free in our search. We're free to question and to explore. But with that freedom also comes a responsibility. That is why we come together, to challenge and support each other, to call each other back to our values that we affirm, to act as sources of mutual accountability, to act as a magnet drawing us back to our moral obligations. Sometimes I think a bit of being a Unitarian Universalist and this search for our free and responsible search for truth and meaning to be a bit like writing an academic paper. I know, super exciting. In this scenario, the writer has a responsibility to do research, to check their sources, and verify claims on the way to their conclusion. You can't just say anything you want and expect others to accept it as true. It needs to be based in a reality. It's okay if we consider the same evidence, consider the same sources, and come to different conclusions. We need not think alike to love alike. That is okay. But it is also important for us to pause and recognize that the things that we share, the stories we tell, the facts we spread, play a role in the unfolding of life, what comes next. Our stories matter. And it's also okay to have a little bit of fun. Ultimately, the thing that I have appreciated about the birds aren't real phenomenon is that it didn't hurt anyone. No one was hurt by this meme that made its way through society. In fact, the founder of this movement, who wrote those words on the side in an interview, said that everything we've done with the birds aren't real movement is made to make sure it doesn't tip into where it could have negative end results on the world. It is a safe space for people to come together and process the conspiracy takeover of America. It's a way to laugh at the madness rather than be overcome by it. Amidst our ongoing search for truth and meaning, it's still important that we have a little bit of fun, that we can joke, but know that the things that we say, the things that we share, matter. So to recap, babies don't come from storks. Birds are real. There's no microchip in the COVID vaccine. The election wasn't stolen. What you choose to accept as true shapes our reality. And I still don't know where the stork comes from. To the glory of life. At this time, I'd like to invite you to rise as you are willing and able, to don your masks as we prepare to sing our final hymn of our service today. It's hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry.
Please join us, or repeat after me as I extinguish the flame of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. May we go forth from this time knowing we don't have to have all of the answers, but we also know that we have each other. May it be so.